children who have been either psychologically or physically damaged due to violence or war really need special attention to be able to re-enter normal society again. This is absolutely important because if we don't do that, then we have a whole generation of people who cannot function normally because of circumstances that have come within their lives. And one of the solutions that I think is part of this is not only having the psychosocial rehabilitation or whatever physical illness that comes to this, but rather to provide opportunities for people who have come from such difficult backgrounds. I myself, I was somebody who came out of a war in Sierra Leone after being forced to fight as a child soldier. And I just imagine if my life, if I hadn't been given that chance to go through rehabilitation, having opportunities to go to school, I would still only believe that I'm only capable of violence, which is what I'd come to know for most of my childhood. And so I think it's a way to restructure people's life, to give them a meaning in their own lives again, to rekindle their own spirit, to know that there's something they can do with their lives, not just what they've been told. So this is very important. I think special attention should be given. And lastly, I think young people who are coming from these kinds of wars can bring about a very rich and addition and to the discussion of what can be done for young people who continue to face these kinds of things, but also how to move societies forward because they've suffered and they have ideas of what can be done to prevent what had happened to them from happening to other people. And we need that kind of talk because oftentimes there are people making decisions who don't know what the realities of suffering are, particularly when it comes to children. So the importance of enforcing Article 38, which basically says that government should do everything to care for children and to make sure that children are not used in armed conflicts. It's very important because I think we've had a lot of issues with children being used in war in various capacities in however many years now. And I think it is really important to have an internationally legally binding instrument that set the age at 18. It used to be 15, but I think 18 is where we are now. And I think it's very important to have that being legally binding, but also have governments do more to make sure that they actually enforce these things. Some people haven't enforced it, some have. But I think one of the remarkable things about this, particularly the optional protocol that came about, which decided to include not only governments but also armed groups, those that are not necessarily state parties, that this law also relates to them, has changed the way people speak about children affected by war, and has also changed the way people look for children to remove them and try to help them and give them a second life when their life has been affected by war. Now I believe that there should be more monitoring mechanisms, more ways to make sure that this is enforced, to make sure that governments do not only sign these things, but they also do things within their countries to prevent this from even occurring. And if in places where it's already occurred, I think more should be done to help these young people regain their lives again. Some things have been done, the law is there, but I think more practical steps on the ground are definitely necessary. The consequences if these rights are not upheld for children, basically we begin to create a society where a lot of young people who have been affected by war, first of all, do not have the capacity, the moral and ethical standards to be able to function as adults if they are not taken care of when they've been affected, whether they've been psychologically or physically damaged by wars. And also, just to start with, I think in every society, people should seriously regard the rights of children. They should take it very strongly, because if you don't, then you begin to lay a foundation of a society that people don't care about other people's lives. So the idea of rights, when people speak about it, sometimes they think it's just on paper. This is about actually protecting human life. And if you cannot protect it from its infancy, when it's young, when it is vulnerable, then there's no life later on, or there's no respect for such life later on. So I think that's the problem that will happen if these rights are not enforced and if people don't take it seriously. Yes, I do believe that children do need special rights supposed to those that are afforded to adults. Because first of all, as I mentioned earlier, children are very vulnerable members of any human society, and I think special care should be taken to be able to bring them into a society where there's peace, where there are certain moral and ethical standards that are in place. In order to do that, there has to be certain guarantees. Also, there are certain parts of the world where there is no such thing at all, such as juvenile legal standards that protect young people who find themselves in certain issues. So when somebody who's under 18 does something wrong, I think there should be more of rehabilitative measures as opposed to punitive measures. This is why I really believe that there should be a special body of law that applies to them, because at this particular age, anyone who goes through anything, their life can be refocused again. Their life can be given a different direction. Well, I've been involved in the struggle for child rights for quite some time now. I think it started by myself being a victim of being dragged into the war in my country in Sierra Leone, and coming out of that and my encounter with UNICEF, removing me from the war, putting me in rehabilitation center, I began speaking based on my experiences, try to put a human face to this experience. And this started in Sierra Leone and then internationally in 1996 when I first came to the United Nations to speak for the launch of the Grasa Machel report for the study of armed conflict and children around the world. And so this is really how it started. And the more I began to speak, the more I met other young people, I gained the desire and the enthusiasm to continue speaking, because I think it is absolutely important, not only adults to speak about the rights of children, but also young people to push on that, to be able to bring new knowledge to how these things can be spoken about, how they can be handled, practical measures that can be taken. And so this is what I've continued to do. I'm a UNICEF advocate for children affected by war, and I've gone to many places around the world to speak to young people, to hear them, to bring that message to the international foreground. And I speak to governments, to UN officials, and so on and so forth. Anyone basically who can listen to me, I try to speak to them about the issue of children and their rights and safeguarding that. What has inspired me about the young people that I've met in my travels, first is their resilience, just their ability to come out of tremendous suffering but be able to turn it around and do something with their lives. I've gone places like Colombia, Uganda, I've gone as far as Brazil in the favelas and things like that. And the young people I've met, what life has thrown them, these experiences, even though they're difficult, they've decided to use it as a way to educate people about resisting violence, about finding ways to protect children, finding ways to really make sure that when young people are removed from violence in that context, they don't go back to it. And that's what has been quite remarkable to me, just how their spirits are still very vibrant. They haven't become dulled at all because of what had happened to them. And they continue to fight for others who don't have the voice to speak for themselves at all. I think those are some of the things that have inspired me tremendously.